Okay, now we're going to be looking at some operations with vectors. So we're going to be adding vectors. So to add vectors geometrically, you draw a representation of the first one, and then you begin drawing the second vector on the head of the first vector. And then finally, you connect the tail of the first one to the head of the second one, and then indicate the direction from tail to head by adding an arrow to the final end there. Okay, the new vector is called the resultant vector. So the resultant vector is what happens when you have an operation with vectors. So for this one, we have two vectors that we're going to use here. One is called u and one is called v. And we're going to be performing these operations using these vectors here. So I wonder if this is going to work. I meant to try this before I started the video, but anyhow, we'll try it now. Okay, so I'm going to use a light color here. The first thing I'm supposed to do is find u plus v. So I'm going to start by tracing u here. And then I want to see if I can move that vector. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. Okay, so I'll just recreate it. That's fine. So when I recreate it, remember direction and length are the things that matter. So I'm going to draw another one. I want to make it look like it has about the same slope, and it needs to have the same direction as well. So I need to make sure I put the arrow on it. And I'm going to label that one as u because that was the first vector there. Now I'm supposed to add to that vector v, so I think I'll do vector v in a different color. I think I'll use pink. And so I need to recreate vector v starting at the head of vector u. So I'm starting right here. That's the tail of it. And when I recreate it, I need to make it have about the same slope. It needs to look like it's about the same. And it needs to be going the same direction. Oh, sorry, have the same length. So that looks like it's about right. And then I'll draw the head of that one on there. So this one is vector v. And now finally I'm ready to put in my resultant vector. So the resultant vector is connecting the tail of the first one that I drew, so here the tail of u, to the head of v. So there we go. Oh, I missed. I'm going to try again. So the tail of u to the head of v, and then I need to put in the direction. So I'm showing my direction is this way. It's from the tail of the first one to the head of the second one. And this would be my u plus v resultant vector. Okay, so we're going to try a few more operations here. The next one is u minus v. Oh, I want to go back and talk about something real quick. On this one here, the resultant vector, the final result there is this part here. This is actually the answer to the problem. The other things that we drew on there were just essentially scratch work. So truthfully, I could get rid of all of those things and I would still be okay. I would have my true answer there. Okay, so now we're going to do u minus v geometrically. So again, I'm going to start with the same colors that I used before. So for vector u, I'm going to start drawing that one. I want it to look like the one that was given. So it needs to be about the same length and going about the same direction. And then I have to subtract v. Now we don't have an operation for subtraction really, so we need to think about other things that we know. Like we know that subtraction is really the same as adding the opposite, like that. Okay, so what it means by the opposite of v there is it means that we just reverse the direction. Now, when I say reverse the direction, that just means you're moving the tail and the head to opposite ends. So it's still going to have the same slant, but the arrow will be on the other side of it here. So I think I'll draw a quick little opposite of V here, up above here. So same slant, but when I draw the head on that one, I need the head to be going the opposite direction as it was from the original over here. So this one is the opposite of V. Alrighty. So when I was drawing that first vector, I forgot to put the head on it. There we go. So there's my U. And I'm going to add to that the opposite of V. So I'm starting at the head of U, and I'm going to draw in the opposite of V, and then put in the directional arrow on that one. So this one is the opposite of V. And then to get the resultant vector for this one, just like before, I need to connect the tail of U with the head of the opposite of V, and then show the direction there. Okay, so this one here is U minus V. All right, now once again, once I've got that resultant vector in there, all of this other stuff that I drew in originally is just scratch work. So really I need to get rid of that. This is my resultant vector. Okay, so we have a couple more. These are going to be harder to do because I'm going to have to scroll so I can see, but we'll make it work. Okay, so the first thing I'm supposed to do is V minus U. Okay, so once again, I'm going to think of that, I'm going to think of that as V plus the opposite of U. There we go, V plus the opposite of U. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to draw vector V. So I'm going to go up and look. I see vector V is going down and to the right. So I'm going to start by drawing a vector down and to the right. Make it look like it's about the same length and about the same slope. And then the arrows indicating that it's going down and to the right rather than up and to the left. So this is my vector V. I'll label that one. Next up, I need the opposite of vector U. So I'm going to go up and have a look at vector U again. So I'm looking at the slope on my vector U. The arrow on the original one is going this direction, but I want the opposite of that. So that means I'm going to draw this same slope, but then I'll draw the arrow on the other end. And I need for it to start where V finished. So I'm starting right here, and I've got the same slope vector. And then I'll put the head on it, going this direction. So that's the opposite of U. And finally, I'm ready for my resultant vector here. The resultant vector would connect the tail of the first one to the head of the second one. And then, of course, I do need to put in, wrong color. I need to put in the directional arrow. So this would be V minus U. That's the resultant vector for this one. So once again, I need to get rid of all of my scratch work vectors over here because the true answer to this is just that resultant vector, just the one I ended up with here. Now I did these two examples on purpose because I wanted to compare U minus V and V minus U. So if we look at those two vectors, what does it look like is the relationship between them? Are they equivalent, or is there something different? So that's a question that you should ponder. Okay, we've got one more example here. We've got U minus 2V. So once again, I have to deal with subtraction. So I'm going to rewrite it as U plus the opposite of 2V. And this time we actually have an extra thing in there also. We've got a what's called a scalar multiple. This 2 that's in front of the v means that we're going to essentially draw that vector v twice, which will make it the same direction, but twice as long. Okay, so I'm ready to get started here. I'm going to go up and I need to start with vector u. So I'm going up to have a look at it again. It goes up and to the right with just that much slope. Looks like maybe about a 60-degree slope with the horizontal there. And so I'll go ahead and recreate that vector. I'll keep my color scheme the same there. So I'm using light blue for that one. So up and to the left here, up and to the right, about a 60-degree angle, about that long, and then put in the head of my arrow there. So this is my vector u. Next, I need to put in the 2 v's, but with the opposite direction. So again, I'm going up to look there. I've got my opposite of v right there. So I'm going to draw 2 of those starting on the head of u. So starting here on the head, I'm going to draw 1 v here. Put the head on that one. That's an opposite of v. And then I'm going to do a second one right on top of that. Again, same slope, same direction. There's the opposite of v again. And then once I geometrically, then I can find the resultant vector by connecting the tail of where I started to the head of the final vector in that series there. And so that would give me, this vector over here is u minus 2v. Once again, my resultant vector is the answer. The rest of what I have drawn on there is really just kind of scratch work. So to keep things clear, I would want to get rid of all of that extra stuff there. There we go. And that is my answer, my u minus 2v. All right, so there are a couple more questions on the Google form for you to answer now before we finish off this lesson.